You can be assessing your students when you're asking your questions, or you can be advancing your students, okay? For each question, you can think about, what is my purpose with this question? Am I assessing my student thinking, or am I advancing their thinking? Okay, just think about, reflect on this. But we are going to describe these terms a little bit. Assessing means you are basing your questions closely on the work that students has produced. And you might ask questions to clarify what they have been thinking, what they understand so far. Or the assessing question will give information about students' level of progress so far. And when you are posing an assessing question, you have to stay with the student. You need to listen to the student. So you're paying close attention to what students are doing, okay? On the other hand, you also owe students some advancing. You want to advance their thinking, right? It's not just checking their understanding. Every student deserves to be advanced along the lines of their development. So I see them as a pair. When we are assessing, we also want to think for each individual student about advancing their thinking. And when we advance students' thinking, think about the learning trajectory for each of your students. Along the trajectory, the student is at a certain place. So what you want to do is, taking that student, you assess the student's level with your assessing questions. You want to take that student a little bit further along their trajectory. So you are going to use what the student is produced as a basis, and you will try to help student make progress toward your target goal. And when you give an advancing question, what you want to do is, you don't need to stay with them. You want them to productively struggle with that question. So you pose your question and you can read, give some thinking time towards your students. Okay? Any questions about assessing and advancing questions? I'm gonna put you into action. Now, what I want you to do is, let's go back to our Padlet page. Aren't we teachers? Let's pretend that the answers on our Padlet page are the strategies our students used. Pick one post and formulate one assessing and one advancing question for that post, okay? You're gonna pick a post. You can add comments. So you're gonna pick the post. We should be able to see your comments. Your assessing and advancing question are Padlet post. So you are gonna go to our Padlet page, and you're gonna pick a post, and you're gonna produce an assessing and advancing question for one of the posts. And then step back and think about in what ways you're assessing and in what ways you're advancing student thinking. And the students are ourselves now, since we produce those strategies. And if we have time, you can move on to another post. I'm gonna give enough wait time so that everybody poses their questions, okay? So are we all clear about the task? Do you have any questions? I'm sorry. So this, and we have on the chat box, I'm just gonna add the Padlet address to the chat box again, because I know some people just joined us. We are going to our Padlet page. And we are gonna post our assessing and advancing questions. And we have a good news, because Dr. Jenny Bay Williams joined us. So we will, hopefully she will join us in some of the conversations that we are having. Hi, Jenny.
Jenny's here. I'm sure there's 84 of us on right now, so she'll.
Nice.
There. I do want to remind everybody to go ahead and click on that link and head to the Padlet. Funda, are we heading into breakout groups?
No, this is individual work. This is individual work. We are all working individually, and we are posting our questions. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my presentation. I'm gonna share our Padlet page so that we can review some of your assessing and advancing questions. Okay, we are thinking about the purpose of these assessing and advancing questions, and these are the assessing and advancing questions if you want a refresher in your mind. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. Yes, Leanne, I was reading your mind. Yes, we can see assessing and advancing questions slides again. So I'm gonna still share my screen, the PowerPoint, and then I'm going to switch to Padlet once you have an idea of the difference between those two. So the expectation from everybody is we are formulating some questions, assessing and advancing questions based on the post you did in the Padlet page. And you're posting those in the comment section for the post. Yes, Jenny, that's a good idea. If you take a picture of this, if you need the information about assessing and advancing questions, please take a picture so that you can always look at this picture on your camera. And then I'm gonna wait 30 more seconds and I'm gonna switch to our Padlet page so that we can see our assessing and advancing question examples. And Jill, yes, we are commenting directly on others' posts so everybody can see your comments. Because this is collective thinking. We are just learning how to develop these questions. And I feel like this is very important as a teacher because you know your goal when you're interacting with students. It really clarifies me because sometimes I think I reflect on my questioning and I think that, oh, I assessed my student thinking, but I was unfair to that student because I didn't advance their thinking. And it's okay if you feel like this is beyond your grade level range. This is why we are here, okay? So we are gonna learn from each other. Okay, I'm stopping sharing this and I'm gonna move on to my Padlet page. I'm just gonna share our Padlet screen. It's so beautiful to see all these different posts. This is the point of purpose of collective work. Once you complete your questions, look at other people's questions and try to practice more. You get better with practice, each practice. Now I'm gonna share the Padlet board. This is not Padlet, this is my screen. All right, so let's see. So Leslie has a question. For example, I'm just reading and that's, and I lost that place. That's the part with the Padlet. Sometimes it just moves to, and you can change that. I didn't change it that. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna have a couple of you share their questions as others are creating questions. Can I have a volunteer to share their thinking and their assessing and advancing questions?
I can share. This is Kelly Simpson from Marion County. I'm going to apologize. I've been kicked out a couple of times, so you all had to let me back in a couple of times. I'm trying to find, so the persons that I commented on, it said the most orangey was 2/3, and I think that's all they said. So my, not advancing, my other question. My assessing question was, they said ratios and 2/3, and that's all they said. And I said, well, how did you use ratios to determine which was the least and the great or the most orangey? So I guess like I was, assessing what they knew about ratios. Well, how do you know 2/3 is the better ratio for the most orangey? And then my advancing question was, like, how did you use your knowledge of ratios to basically like order your ratios or percents. So kind of leading the person to talk about what were ratios, and maybe they used percents, or maybe they converted, to decimals, and they were able to order it that way. But basically having them explain how did they order, how did they know which portion was the most orangey and which one was the least.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, thank you for sharing. A couple of things that I would like to talk about Kelly's approach to assessing and advancing. I think she did a nice, great start point. She wanted to assess whether students know how to create ratios. So creating a ratio statement is something important in this work. And you want to know they have an understanding of ratios. And in advancing, we base our work to student work, and we want to move the student along. Knowing what ratio means doesn't mean that you can use to make decisions. So what you may be advancing your students, if the student haven't used those ratios yet, just wrote ratios like 2 to 3, mix A, 5 to 9, mix B, just wrote those ratios, that's the first step. You're assessing their understanding what these ratios mean in terms of the context of the problem. That's another assessing question, because they can write a number statement like 2 to 3, but do they know 2 means amount of concentrate and 3 means amount of water? You want to know that the students can understand what ratio means in this context, how the ratio plays out in this contextual situation. But the students may not be able to know. They can actually use those ratio statements to compare quantities. I think Kelly had a great start, but we can more on refining that question. How can you use those ratio statements to compare? And what you are doing is you are giving a question. Oh, you have a good start. But is there a way that we can use those ratio statements to compare quantities? That's a big question. Let the kids wrestle with it and come up with some ideas. And if student is struggling, you can produce more specific question based on the student's work. Thank you, Kelly. We can have just one more person, and I love hearing your voices. So if you can volunteer and share your assessing advancing questions and your reasoning, that would be great.
I'll share.
Thank you.
I responded to a post where they said that the most was A and the least was C, but they didn't give any detail. So my assessing question was, what procedure did you follow to come up with these answers?
Mm-hmm.
And then my advancing question was, could you have used a different method or procedure and came up with the same responses?
Mm-hmm. Nice, Brittany. The thing that you're asking is, how did you do this? How did you come up? So you're assessing their understanding of using a certain procedure. And then you're advancing because you are building on what the students know by asking for an additional strategy. And that will help our purpose, because one of the learning goals from this lesson was building a repertoire of strategies. Nice thinking. There is one flaw in the Padlet page. I'm sorry, I didn't fix that, and I knew that was going to happen. You can actually fix it. I didn't fix, so the last person's comment, so things keep moving around. Sorry for that. Stay with me. But you can fix when you use the Padlet in the settings. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. I hope you had some experience in formulating, assessing, and advancing questions. That was the purpose of this activity. But what I want to bring us, so I have some examples from Take Action book. For example, one assessing question, Take Action middle school book. This is an NCTM publication. The example they gave us as an assessing question is, how did you decide that mix A was the most orange and mix C was the least orange? This is basically gathering information about students' decision, because students just write the decision, like say, mix A, but they may not explain their thinking. So you want to know whether they understood what they are saying. They know what they are doing. You're assessing their thinking. Advancing question can take students a little bit further. You can extend the thinking. What if mix E used 1 cup of concentrate and 2 cups of water? How will it compare with mix A? This is taking the problem to a different level. It's like an extension question. But you can also ask, for example, can you model each of the 4 mixes with number types or diagram? You're not extending, but you're adding additional level of strategy to the kids' thinking. Okay, so these are some examples. I want us to go back to our coaching book, okay? And I ask you to open page 112. Because our coaching books, it has good examples of assessing and advancing questions, even though they're not titled as assessing and advancing questions, okay? And then I put the link in here. In a second, I'm gonna type it in the chat box as well. So you can access these materials digitally. So please open 112, page 112. You should see a table like this. It is 5.4, questioning across lesson phases. And this table talks about how you can create questions at the anticipate phase of the lesson. This means planning phase of the lesson. When you're launching, introduce a task, and also monitoring the students. And I just put this monitoring phase because monitoring is the stage, is the time that you want to assess and advance their thinking. Monitoring means you're allowing kids to work on the problem, individual or in a group. And to left hand, look at the left-hand corner. What kind of questions are left-hand corner? On the left-hand side, what kind of questions do you think? Are they assessing questions or advancing question examples?
Are we allowed to talk out?
Yes, please, please.
Okay.
I like hearing voices.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed if we were going to categorize them as assessing or advancing, I think they seem more like assessing questions.
Mhm.
I would specifically say that they're more like funneling questions because it doesn't really assess like their full understanding, but it kind of funnels them to get to where you can ask an assessing question.
Yes, nice summer. Yes, the left side, okay, again, it depends on the students. If the student is stuck and doesn't know what to do, it might serve as an advancing question, but mostly serving the assessing student level, where they are at, and then giving them a start point. And then the right-hand side, I liked how the book describes two levels. Advancing question, if the student is stuck, or advancing question, like extension questions. So you can categorize advancing question to help students make progress for this problem, or you can use advancing question to move along to a different path, along to a different considerations for the same problem, okay? So you can tag that page. I think that is a great tool, and it also gives you some ideas about the summarizing the task questions as well. So it talks about all parts of the lessons. I'm just gonna call Jenny here, since this is kind of her work, if she doesn't mind, since we have the luxury of having her here. Would you, is there anything else that you want to say about this chart? I really love these question stems, because sometimes it's hard to create assessing and advancing questions, and this gives us a good start for us.
No, yeah. Thank you for asking me. It's such a treat to hear somebody else speaking about the work. I love how you have framed it as assessing and advancing, and just this idea of being purposeful about our questioning. You know, really that teaching practice is pose purposeful questions. So I really think this is a nice way to think about being purposeful. So I don't have anything to add.
Thanks. It's good to hear your voice. Anyways, thank you so much. Okay, so we are gonna talk about types of questions. Remember when I looked at the instructional triangle, we talk about patterns of questions, purpose of questions, types of questions. And this is from Principles to Action book, our blue book. In Principles to Action, they suggest at least 4 types of questions: gathering information questions, probing thinking questions, making the math visible, and encouraging reflection and justification questions. This is kind of I think it can be a great professional reflection moment, just to keep track of types of questions we're asking in the class. And I have a conjecture about the general pattern of questions that you see in the class. Gathering information questions are usually asked easily. Okay, what did you find? What is the answer? What strategy you use? But are we also allowing kids to reflect and justify what they are doing? Or are we helping kids make the mathematics visible in their questions? Okay, so just think about these types of questions as you're asking, but I want to connect this again to another framework in our coaching book, which is on page 118. Types of questions I think should map to mathematical knowledge that we are highlighting in our questions. Because when I am gathering information about questions, this is on page 118, Bloom's taxonomy in here, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, the revised version of Bloom taxonomy. And in mathematics education, we distinguish the knowledge, mathematical knowledge as conceptual and procedural. And I love this is the way it's framed. Because when you think about your type of question, okay, I'm gathering information now, but am I just gathering information about procedural knowledge? Like the formulas we use, or the definitions that we create, or are we gathering information about conceptual understanding? And I'm here, understanding, not remembering. Or are we allowing kids to create justification by using the conceptual basis? So I think those types of questions, it is important to vary our types of questions, but it is also important to keep an eye on conceptual basis and procedural basis, along with Bloom's taxonomy. And from my naive new starter perspective, you can just focus on these dimensions first, conceptual and procedural, and then later on start incorporating both dimensions, whichever is easier for you. Okay? So we are gonna, again, put this into action, the types of questions, and also this mathematical knowledge by using some student work. Now we are gonna do group work. I have some orange juice student work, real student work, not your work now. And I'm gonna share with you a Google Slides link, okay? I have a Google Slides that I will share with you. Let me just type into the chat box so that what I want you to do is open up this Google Slide page, and I'm gonna tell you what to do, okay? Now, please open up the link, but don't work on it, okay? We are gonna make our own copy. This is important. Just open up the link, and I'm gonna tell you what to do with the Google Slides that I just shared with you. Okay. And I will go to our Google Slides page. So when you open up the document, you should see slides. I think I have about 8 slides. What you need to do this, first thing is first, please make your own copy. Make a copy of the entire presentation, okay? I don't want you to mess this slide so that, because we are 90 people, how many, 85 people, okay? Please make your own copy. When you go to the file section, you can make your own copy. That will be the document that you are gonna work. And what I want you to do is, you can write your own team name. For example, Ballard can say it's a Ballard team, or Jefferson can say this is Jefferson team. I labeled mine as team NKU. And then this is a task description. We are gonna think about our questioning for the summarized portion of the lesson. When we were formulating our assessing and advancing question, we were thinking monitoring part of the lesson. Let's focus on the summarized part of the lesson. What I want you to do is formulate 4 or 5 questions for the summarized section. You want this to have productive, mathematically rich conversation. I know this is ideal, but you're collective, you're a team, so you're not just yourself. And then you're gonna try to think about what kind of question I use. I have a hint here, so you don't need to take a picture. I incorporated the slide type of questions for you. And these are our different groups student work. Students completed this work collectively. This is group 1, this is group 2, this is group 3. What you are gonna do is, you are gonna write your questions. I gave a couple examples. For example, I have a question 1 here, example. This is based on group 1's work, and it's a probing thinking question. And then you can add more questions. So you're gonna add 4 or 5 questions. And finally, you're gonna try to locate your question into this table. Okay, questions before we move on to the breakout groups.
Are
Any
we gonna
questions?
share the, are we sharing the slide with whoever's in the slide deck with whomever is in our breakout room?
Perfect
Or are we
question.
working on our own?
Yes, you're sharing the slide. You're working as a team collectively. And if you can share your work with me at the end, that will be great so that I can reflect, share that work as well. Okay. So you are working over one common slide, and in your groups, in your rooms, you can share that common slide with your teammates so that you're working from the same document. Thank you for asking that question.
Can you put your email address in the chat then, so that way when we do
Yes,
include you in there?
Yes, let me just type that.
And do they also have the ability to share their screen? So they've got that ability.
Yes, but once you're presenting, you can share your screen so that you don't have to worry about sharing. That's a good idea.
I've given them that setting.
So you can share your screen when you're in your breakout group so that you are looking at the same screen. We are going to take about 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back, and then we're going to finish quickly. Okay.
Yeah, because there are a handful of you on smaller devices that may have a hard time navigating the slides if you're on a phone. So make sure you can see what your other friends in your room are sharing.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time to work on our breakout groups. So do we have everybody back? I guess we do, right?
We do.
So what we are going to, I know this was not fair to the amount of thinking required in this activity because there's a lot to take in. You need to understand the student work, and also you need to formulate these productive questions as you're having the kids summarize. That's why we need to have this intentional planning at the beginning so we are ready to go. But isn't this somehow real teaching? You see your students working, and then you try to formulate those good questions to allow for productive conversations. Okay? The purpose of this activity was to have these different types of questions in our mind, but also the mathematical knowledge that we aim for from those questions, because it's very important to make that mathematics front and center of the conversation. Now I'm gonna have, I think I have a couple groups shared with me so that I can maybe look at their examples. And I know this was not enough time. I'm just gonna see if we have some question examples from different groups. Okay. So let's see. Again, I'm gonna just ask for one example and then I'm gonna move on. Is there anyone that would like to share the question types? And I will share the slides so that you know what we are doing. Is there from any of the teams, did you formulate some questions that we can share as a team? This is Jefferson County's, but they don't have to share. I just put theirs.
I'll share since you talked about us first. I'm Brittany Johnson from Jefferson County. The last question we came up with, we had a little bit of help, but I think I liked that. I really liked it. We talked about how group 3 was the only group that didn't use a visual model. And so we asked, how does the work that group 3 did compare and connect with the work that group 2 did?
Very, very nice question. Very nice question. Yes, I think that's what one of the connections. This is the summarized portion of the lesson. And in our questioning, we want the kids to make those connections. But you need to prepare those questions, right? Okay, see, and they place on their tables. Any other questions from Jefferson County they want to talk about? I can move on to one other team. Is there another team? We can have one more team to share their questions. And I'm gonna use this as a basis.
I can share from Madison Berea. One of our questions was sort of similar to the Jefferson County question. Since it's in the summarizing portion of the lesson, really asking students to look at other groups' works and compare and contrast. So find similarities, find differences. What do you notice about those strategies? Is there anything that you could use in the future, or can you provide feedback to other groups or suggestions?
Nice, very nice. And those will be informed from student work. But I don't want you to create a misconception, to have a misconception. Sometimes at this phase of the lesson, you can bring back the big mathematical idea. And this is using different comparative situations. For example, a question like, how is using percent different from using ratio reasoning? You see where I'm getting with this question, how using percent different from ratio reasoning? Can someone explain how, how they might be different and similar in some ways? Now it's not the student work. Now we are going back to the mathematical idea. To help our elementary folks, can someone from middle school or high school help us understand how percents might be different from using ratios?
Well, it goes back to the discussion from when we first did the padlock on the sticky note that she spoke about. It said that that student went ratios, fractions, but they didn't derive how they came up with which fraction was the bigger unit because they didn't give the percents. So when you have the percents versus the ratios, it ties really all three of those concepts in. And if you take a look at the student work and samples that were given to us, some of those students use diagrams to represent their understanding of the fractions and the ratios. So when you tie it into percents, it adds that bigger piece of 1 out of a 100 total. So it hits on a couple of different things. But I'm high school now, far removed from 6th grade. So, but that was my piece to end.
No, very well said. And one more thing I want to note. So percent reasoning, isn't that about part-whole comparisons? You have a part and a whole. How about in ratios? We can have part-part reasoning or part-whole reasoning. And we want the students to realize when you are talking about a percent, you are describing things out of a whole. So you wouldn't want to write a percent. You may, mathematically, abstractly, it might be correct, but in terms of the context, may not be right. 2/3 as a percent. You want to write 2/5 as a percent because it's out of a whole. Okay, now we have just a little bit time left. I have some suggestions. Okay, we have talked about a lot of questioning. So where to start? What you can do is you can create a repertoire of open-ended high-level questions. And our coaching book has those question stamps for you. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And they have a lot of references to gather those open-ended questions. You can collect data on components of your questioning, whether like productive talk moves, wait time. Again, our coaching book has great observation protocols, data gathering protocols. And you can also use a planning session by using some anticipated responses, just like we did in here. If we have these responses, what kind of questions we can produce? And then you can review some classroom videos, and then you can analyze your questioning skills so that you can get better at your questioning. So this is an example from our Jenny Bay Williams book, Question Stamps, and that is page, let me see, that's page am I at?
110.
110, thank you so much. Yes, 110 has these question stamps, so you can use these stamps. And I have another resource, and then it has also some questions for you to list. Another resource from Take Action. I'm gonna ask Kelly to share this presentation and these resources with you after our presentation so that you have these question stamps, okay? And then this is again from our coaching book, okay? So you can use these tools to get better. This is an example of data gathering tool. This is productive talk moves. And then you can videotape your own classroom, and then you look at your questions and your students' responses so that you can assess yourself in terms of productive talk moves. Okay, any questions? This is the end of my presentation. I have a couple of other detailed things to share, but do you have any questions or comments about questioning before moving on to a different session? And I'm sure you have. I asked in a way that, do you have any questions? No, we don't. So don't take my word wrong.
Funda, I love it when they type some stuff in the chat, thinking about this presentation, maybe what little nugget has stuck with you that will inform what you're doing in both your face-to-face and your virtual, no matter what it is that you're doing out there in the teaching world.
Yes, please. So type in the chat box. That's a great suggestion so that we use chat box. What was your takeaway? What was your reflection opportunity? What are the things that you plan you would like to do? So you can type into chat box, and then I'm gonna end with some more ideas for our professional growth. Remember, back in summer, we talked about professional growth goals. You all formulated growth goals for your teams. Small level, medium level, top level goals. But in order to keep track of our growth, we need to collect some data, some evidence, okay? I created a video just that talks about this. I'm gonna ask Kelly to share that video with you as well so that you have an idea about data gathering to document your growth. Because what we are gonna ask you to do is, when we come back in January, hopefully in person, you never know what's gonna happen, we are gonna ask you to share some of that data with us so that we can talk about your growth. Because this is a trajectory, and in order to keep us on target, we need to have this continuous reflection. These are some ways that you can collect data. And I in that video that Kelly is going to share with you, I talk about each of these items so that you have an idea what I mean with these different forms of data. And then these are our upcoming sessions and our focuses.
Funda, I thank you so much as always. It's your voice in my ears that makes my heart grow bigger because it just is filling for my professional soul. And Kentucky Math Teacher Leaders, you're in for a treat. Next Zoom session, which is September the 23rd, we have Western Kentucky University's Dr. Kenita Duclos. She is the co-author of Catalyzing Change at the high school level. And so we have presents that will be showing up on your doorstep. I'm not gonna say what they are, but just like you got a present when you began Kentucky Math Teacher Leaders, we are sending you another present in the mail so that you will have some wonderful things to prepare. So look for that. And especially if you haven't received it in about the next 10 days. If you haven't received it in the next 10 days, they should go out Monday, and then you should get it by the end of next week. It's always good, those of you who are like, okay, I haven't got my thing yet, I haven't got my package yet, but it's something about what she said today, and it's a present that's in preparation for next session, so be looking for it. Thank you, Funda. Thank you to those of you who have heroic efforts on the behalf of our Kentucky children all across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And we look forward to weekly emails that hopefully kind of fill your soul, give you this little respite in the world of uber professionalism, because we're just talking about the positivity of it all. We got a great profession. This is a wonderful cohort of teachers, and we're learning so much and growing. As Angela Duckworth says, we are growing with our multiplication of our effort. So we thank you guys. See ya.